This is our main character, Zich. Just a few seconds ago, he won a duel against his half-brother, Greg. This duel was to determine who would inherit the family title. Everyone in the audience was astonished, not understanding how this supposedly worthless young master could defeat someone considered a genius like Greg. After the duel ended, Zich turned towards a man on the high platform and said, "Father, you promised the title of Count would go to the winner of this duel." Upon hearing his son's words, the man began to roar with anger. "How dare you? This damn duel won't decide anything." But after hearing his father's blatant reversal, Zich calmly removed his gloves and said, "Well, I expected this to happen. I never once in my life wanted that damn title." With that, he threw the ring on his hand towards the man. This ring represented the heir. Zich had always kept it because he was the eldest son. As for the man, after seeing Zich throw the heir's ring towards him like a piece of trash, he couldn't keep his composure and rushed to the railing, shouting, "What the hell are you doing?" To this question, Zich answered nonchalantly, "What does it look like I'm doing? I'm leaving this family on my own accord." The reason Zich could say these words so easily was because this was his second life. In his previous life, he had seen how despicable this family could be. But that wasn't the main reason. One of the biggest reasons he could give up the heir position without needing its protection was because, in his previous life, he had reached the pinnacle of human strength. He was also the one who had taken countless lives, with those who worshipped and feared him, calling him the Demon King. And the reason he was reborn, it was because he had been killed. All of this began a day earlier. This was when the decisive battle took place between Zich and the hero's party. When enemies meet, there's no need for many words. The entire hero's party began to unleash countless attacks towards Zich. However, facing these kinds of attacks, Zich only needed a few sword slashes to cut through them all. At this moment, a voice rang out, "Bless you with endless strength, O hero." After this girl's blessing, the hero's entire body was covered by a golden holy light, and his power reached its peak. The very next moment, the hero unleashed a powerful slash towards Zich. Seeing this enormous sword energy before him, Zich knew that he couldn't block this attack. A world-shaking explosion ensued, and Zich lost consciousness. After an unknown amount of time passed, Zich slowly began to regain consciousness because numerous voices were ringing in his ears. "Kill him now. He's the Demon King of Strength. Who knows when he'll recover? While he's in this state, he can't do anything to us," said the hero. At this moment, Zich began to fully awaken and realized that he was still alive. Standing before him was the handsome hero. Although he didn't like him, Zich had to admit that the hero was indeed very good-looking. The hero pointed his sword at Zich and said, "Listen here, Zich. Before I end you, I'll recount all the crimes you've committed, stealing hundreds of lives from the holy knights of the Carwoodman squad, killing the innocent. And of course, these aren't false accusations. Zich had indeed done these things." Even though these were his deeds, hearing them from the hero's mouth made Zich feel a bit irritated. At the same time, a thought emerged in Zich's mind. Dying like this would be a pity. Fortunately, he still had the key to bending fate. Thanks to it, he could strike this bastard one last time with his sword, altering the target's destiny to change the future. However, he didn't know how the hero's future would change. While Zich was lost in thought, the hero finished recounting Zich's crimes and prepared to execute him. "Demon King Zich, may you become a person who knows how to do good deeds in your next life." He swung his sword down as he spoke. "All right then, if we have the chance but not now, this is something we must do quickly to teach this fool a lesson." At this point, Rich's middle finger began to glow. Then he shot something towards the hero. Immediately, it began to shatter the armor and pierce into the flesh and blood inside. Upon seeing this scene, the hero started to get furious. "Why do you have this?" But Zich didn't intend to answer that question. Seeing the hero so enraged, he was immensely pleased. "It seems effective to make you so angry, huh?" Meanwhile, the hero on the other side couldn't contain his rage and swung his sword at Zich's head. Instantly, Zich wished he could live longer than this, but he had no regrets either. The scene shifts to another setting. Zich suddenly woke up from his bed due to loud noises that kept him from sleeping. "Damn it, These birds keep chirping and won't let me sleep. But now Zich realized something, so he began to check again. First, he looked at his hands, then felt his throat to check. Finally, he looked at himself in the mirror. He's young again, but why? Clearly, he had lost to those villains before. Then he sat down and muttered to himself, and finally used the key to twist fate. Was it because of this? But where did he get that key? He couldn't remember at all. Zich tried to grasp his head, but still couldn't remember where he got that key from. But now, he was sure of one thing. No matter what, he had definitely returned to the past. He was in his own room, which means at this moment, he was still living with his family. Now what should he do? Maybe he should go find the key to twist fate. But wait, why did he leave his family back then? He felt like something was holding him back, but suddenly, at this moment, the door to his room suddenly opened, making Zich start to think. Father may just come in like this, the eldest son of the noble family, huh? Oh no, not at this time. Even the servants don't see me as noble. Afterward, the door swung fully open and a complaining voice echoed, "Young master, you're still in the room." The voice belonged to a blonde-haired servant. Looking at his figure, Zich couldn't recall who he was, but at least he was addressing him correctly. Without saying anything, the servant continued, "You always leave at dawn, but now you've given up on that too, haven't you? You can't afford to be lazy now, can you?" Zich found the servant's rambling irritating, so he sighed and beckoned him over. "Come here," Zich said. The servant, seeming puzzled, approached nonetheless. But then Zich just smiled and looked at him without saying anything, which made the servant uncomfortable. "If you called me here, say something," he said irritably. To answer the question, Zich promptly punched him. The servant hastily hugged his face and asked, "What are you doing?" But at that moment, he saw a very different Zich in front of him, who had a cold and dangerous air about him. This made the servant not even dare to look directly at his master. Next, Zich tripped the servant, causing him to fall to the ground. The next thing waiting for the servant was a merciless beating. The servant began to cry and apologize, but it seemed Zich had no intention of stopping. However, just then, a voice spoke up. "What's going on?" Upon hearing this voice, the servant seemed relieved as if he had been saved. He hurriedly rushed toward the voice and said, "Sir Binor, this time again. I ask, what's going on?" The servant was still very flustered, even raising his middle finger to Zich. At the same time, Zich also thought, "This scoundrel is a bit rude." Binor, seeing Zich not responding, asked again, "Why aren't you answering?" Hearing this, Zich replied coldly, "Is this how you talk to me? So are you planning to hit me like you did Hand?" Zich smiled and said, "Enough, a dirty dog can't even tell who its owner is, so it's best to hit me to know what's going on." Binor, upon hearing this, seemed to think he could defeat Zich now that he had heard this strange Vietnamese story. "Do you think you're so good?" Zich responded, acknowledging, "With my current physique and skills, I can't beat you. I admit that. But what now? By title, I am your master. I can't just train a dog to obey me, can I?" With these words, Zich began pulling the tablecloth toward him. On the other hand, Binor turned back angrily and said, "Does your dog even know who I am?" But before he could finish his sentence, Zich threw the tablecloth at him, momentarily blocking his view. Seizing the opportunity, Zich grabbed a nearby flower vase and swung it straight at Binor's head. This was a lesson Zich wanted to teach him. Strength isn't everything, you miserable knight. Afterward, Zich turned to look at Hand. Well, that concludes our story from earlier, doesn't it? Hearing this, Hand visibly blanched, knowing the next thing awaiting him would be an unmerciful beating. Of course, as soon as this incident ended, Zich was summoned to the master's office to resolve matters. Standing before this door, Zich had many thoughts swirling in his mind. In the past, he had been terrified of opening this door, but now he was completely indifferent. He opened the door to find the master and others waiting inside. On the other side, Binor, upon seeing Zich enter, gave him a look full of annoyance. This incident recalled to him the recent conversation with Grecha, who had learned of the matter. "You disappointed me when you bowed your head to the ground and became a disgrace to the Steelwill Knights," Greg said, raising his hand to touch Biner's face as if petting a dog. You didn't do anything wrong, did you? Be confident, for Ziki is your opponent. You will have the chance to defeat him in the future. These memories left Binor extremely furious. At this moment, the elderly man, the household head, also began to speak up. The late arrival was none other than Count Vordo, Zeke's father. Upon hearing his inquiry, Zeke replied in a tone of extreme weariness, "What's the matter, father?" Vordo, upon hearing Zeke's response, began to grow more irritated. "Boy, have you forgotten how to greet properly? Does that mean nothing to you?" Upon hearing this, Vordo became even more enraged. "Such rotten thoughts. How can you inherit my title acting like this? At least make an effort." Hearing this, Zeke retorted sarcastically, "So you're talking about the official heir, father? Have you ever truly considered passing that title to me, you old man?" Before Vordo could add more, a gentle hand was placed on his shoulder, and a voice spoke out, "See, Count? I've told you time and again. Yet this child Zeke continues to be so disrespectful." This woman was Count Vordo's wife, Zeke's stepmother, Pharrell. Upon hearing Pharrell's words, Zeke clenched his fists in anger. "I remember these two well. They always find ways to surpass me, to slander and manipulate." Thinking this, he took a deep breath and suddenly began to behave with utmost propriety. "How could I be disrespectful and rude to those who are supposed to be respected? It's all a misunderstanding, mother." Upon hearing these words, Pharrell's face twisted uncomfortably. Yet Zeke continued confidently, "I'm grateful to these two for bringing me here to meet my father. I sincerely apologize, father." At this point, Zeke started walking towards the sword hanging on the wall. He took hold of it, a move that surprised everyone present. Unconcerned, he aimed the sword towards Hand and continued, "I've made a mistake. I'll use this opportunity to put an end to it." Seeing this, Hand paled, quickly looking around for support. Nearby, Gray, the second son, saw the scene and was delighted. "This fool," he chuckled, "he's aiming a sword at someone right in front of our father." Vordo, now speaking up again, asked sternly, "How dare you draw your sword against another here?" Zeke responded nonchalantly, "Of course, the one born as the legitimate heir of the great Count Steelwill deserves to have his head chopped off. Is that not why you called me here?" Upon hearing this, Pharrell quickly interjected, "Hold on, what do you mean Hand insulted you? That can't possibly be true." Meanwhile, Zeke lowered the tip of his sword to the floor and continued, "So you're saying I'm lying to our father?" This statement truly put Hand in a difficult position. "If I say anything wrong here, I could really be killed," he thought. Even Pharrell couldn't protect herself. Zeke also knew that this person was definitely connected to Pharrell, but he couldn't understand why she would go to such lengths just because of him. In the midst of Hand's struggle to respond, Binor spoke up, "That's right, the young master is lying." Pharrell seemed relieved to find an escape route and quickly grabbed Binor's arm, asking, "Is that true, Binor?" "Yes, my lady," Binor replied. "Zeke unilaterally attacked Hand and me." Zeke chuckled upon hearing this. "A knight like you claiming to be easily attacked like that. Have you no shame? You probably won't admit your own guilt either, Binor," Zeke added. Binor began to feel ashamed and said, "None of my words were lies." Zeke didn't expect much from Binor's honesty, so he prepared to play along. In the end, everyone will claim they're innocent, right? If that's the case, there's no need to talk anymore. Use your abilities to prove it, Zeke said, pointing his sword towards Binor. Binor gritted his teeth and muttered, "He's lost his mind." Ignoring his question, Zeke turned to his father and said confidently, "You've seen it, haven't you, father? Finally, you can use this opportunity to eliminate me if I lose this fight." This aligned with Vordo's intentions, so he immediately agreed to allow the duel to take place. Binor was also enthusiastic upon hearing that. "Remember what you said," he thought. "Perhaps now I've figured out a way to handle Zeke." Zeke, on the other hand, was quite pleased with this decision. "Thank you for that decision, father," he said. "I can now decide the time and place myself." As he said this, he turned his head to leave, his indifferent attitude suggesting he already had victory in hand. This made Vordo somewhat angry. He intended to scold Zich a bit before letting him go, but perhaps this could be an appropriate pretext to pass the title of Count to Greg. Meanwhile, Zich, after sheathing his sword back on the wall, said to his father, "Father, I also want to try to change from now on. You'll see. I realize I won't achieve what I want if I keep dwelling on the past." Vordo found it a bit difficult to understand what Zich wanted. "Are you talking about the title of Count?" Upon hearing this, Zich turned and said, "No matter what I say now, you won't understand, father. We'll meet again in that duel, Binor." To prepare for the upcoming battle, Zich threw himself into training. Meanwhile, his mind was filled with countless thoughts. Reflecting on himself, he wondered, how could I be so weak and naive? Father's attention is everything. Yet I wasn't even allowed to learn swordsmanship properly because he was so reluctant. At that time, I didn't know about the great beings and the bold potential within me, Zich thought. Normally, a person's innate mana is fixed, and mine is much larger than normal, but it's also more daring and harder to control. That's why Zich only used mana sparingly. Just a bit of it had caused an explosion, making it difficult for him to return to the mana he possessed as a demon king. But even then, it couldn't compare to the mana of a dragon, he mused, which disappeared so suddenly, it would awaken in me at the mention of it. I even received the title of Demon King for my strength, Zich recalled, but to achieve that, I really had to go through a lot of difficulties and challenges to the point where everything felt like it was being arranged by someone. Thinking this, Zich stood up and said to the tree behind him, "Stop spying and disappear." These words startled the person hiding behind the tree trunk. They knew they had been discovered, so they no longer hid and stepped out from behind the tree. It turned out to be Gray, the second son of the Count. At this moment, he also remarked, "It seems like you finally awakened your mana. But surely you don't think you can win with just that level of skill? Facing Binor in the battle for the Count's title. Why did you act so differently from me?" Greg sneered contemptuously, then pretended to be kind as he advised Zich, "Just continue living as you have until now. You need to learn to read the situation. I'll take care of you in the future so you won't feel." But before he could finish, Greg fell silent because Zich's face had darkened considerably. The mockery from this imitator had truly infuriated Zich. "So, you're afraid that I'll take that Count position from you?" Zich's voice was cold and menacing. Upon hearing Zich's chilling tone, Greg felt a bit uneasy, but then he regained his composure and said, "No way. I won't give up becoming the Count just because I can't defeat someone as worthless as you." Zich, on his part, was unfazed by Greg's words. "If that's how you think, then I should act as my younger brother wishes. Let's see who will inherit the Count's title. Let's see who will win, following the warrior spirit of our family." Greg, hearing this, pushed Zich's hand off his shoulder and said, "Are you crazy? Are you suggesting we have a duel?" "If that's what you mean," Zich replied calmly. On this side, Greg also agreed, "I have no reason to refuse." "All right then, I'll consider you've agreed. I'll decide the time and place." With that said, Zich turned and left. And not long after that, the battle between Zich and Binor began, witnessed by countless people of the territory. Facing Zich, Binor spoke loudly, "I've sincerely learned a lesson from you, young master. Now it's time for me to teach you a lesson, because skill is what determines victory. You'll regret not wearing armor." While Binor went on with his boasting, Zich paid no attention. What he noticed was that his sword seemed a bit dull. He wondered who had been neglecting its maintenance. After Binor's initial martial display, the referee began to announce, "The battle begins." Immediately upon hearing the order, both rushed to gain the upper hand. Binor launched the first attack. Although Zich managed to block it, he was visibly shaken. Even if he's foolish, a knight is still a knight, Zich thought, though just for show. In truth, he was somewhat surprised by Binor's strength. Binor, after seeing Zich struggle to block his attack, began to smile. He then started a relentless barrage of attacks. "How about this, young master? If we fight on equal terms, you can't defeat me." Having to constantly defend against heavy blows pushed Zich's mana back for a moment. However, this gave Zich the opportunity to focus his mana into his sword, enhancing his attack power. Indeed, his sword, enveloped in mana, became both faster and more powerful. Already at a disadvantage in a normal fight, Zich now had to endure even more mana-infused strikes. It was indeed layer upon layer of difficulty. Binor found satisfaction in pushing Zich this far. Meanwhile, high on the platform, where the family observed, Steelwill, the steward beside the patriarch, saw Zich's ability to hold his own against Binor for so long and was slightly amazed. Young Master Zich is fighting better than I expected. He's managed to block several of Binor's attacks already. But Lady Florel didn't like these words, so she intentionally belittled him. But I think we're still dominating, aren't we? However, before Vordo could respond, the steward continued, of course, because young Master Zich hasn't been properly trained in swordsmanship. The steward's words earned him an uncomfortable glare from Lady Florel, while Vordo remained silent. At this moment, in the stands, the audience was cheering loudly, urging Binor to finish him off and not hold back anymore. These words only fueled Binor's bloodlust even more. "Did you hear that, young master? The audience wants me to end this," Binor said. "Your best choice now, if you don't want to get hurt, is to surrender." With that, the sword in his hand began to surge with even more intense mana. Binor might not have the strongest natural strength, but his trash talk was no joke. But as soon as he finished speaking, Zich also began to channel mana into his sword, seemingly preparing to unleash some technique. Seeing Zich use mana, Binor was stunned to the point of dumbstruck. "No way," Binor thought silently. On the opposite side, Zich launched his own technique, releasing mana from his sword to form countless mana bullets. Binor, though caught off guard by this sight, managed to either dodge or block all of these mana bullets. However, after unleashing this attack, Zich's entire arm started to tremble. He realized that his mana was slipping out of control. While he couldn't harm Binor, the attack had left a strong impression on the spectators in the stands. They began discussing among themselves. "Could you just see that? I couldn't believe it." Just now, Zich, even the steward on Binor's side, had to marvel. "Did you see that, Count? That was an extended sensory skill. That's when a person merges their sword and body through mana. How could he possibly use such a technique?" Meanwhile, down below, Binor was also worried and puzzled. When did he learn a skill like this? But his stance became unstable after using mana, as if his body and mana were separating and he couldn't control it. Our opponent is just a weak mana user. Thinking this, Binor's face turned serious and he said, "Enough playing around." He then launched another attack. First, he gathered mana into his sword and prepared to unleash a powerful technique honed over countless years of combat. Zich, with his experience, managed to narrowly avoid Binor's technique. If he had been hit by this move, it would have been game over for him. Binor was somewhat surprised that Zich managed to dodge this attack, but he wasn't done yet. His next move wasn't a laser shot. Instead, he concentrated all his energy into his sword and thrust towards Zich. "You won't dodge this one," Binor shouted. True to Binor's words, Zich couldn't evade this attack. As a result of being hit by Binor's technique, Zich was sent flying like a cannonball into a wall. Looking at the current situation, it seemed Zich had lost his ability to fight. The crowd in the stands began cheering. "Binor is truly amazing." Binor himself was enjoying this victorious feeling. "It's clear I've won. Do I need to attack him further?" he wondered aloud. After his declaration, the crowd cheered even louder. Meanwhile, Zich struggled to use his sword to support his body. "I can't defeat you with these body techniques alone. But in this battle, I haven't fought for real yet," Zich shouted. After speaking, Zich charged towards Binor while he still had his back turned. First, Zich swept his sword down to the ground, then kicked up a cloud of dust towards Binor's face. While this move might seem trivial, it was very effective in any battle scenario. While Binor was still hindered by the sand dunes blocking his view, Zich promptly bestowed upon him a skill involving a wild buffalo's stone-hurling charge. Upon being hit by this move, Binor began swirling backwards. As he struggled to sit up, his sight was still obstructed by the lingering sand in his eyes. "Damn coward," Binor muttered silently to himself. Without hesitation, Zich pointed his sword at Binor's neck and said, "You call yourself a coward, only capable of using that excuse to justify your failures in actual combat." Thus began a tense staring match between the two. Eventually, Binor, unable to bear the fight due to the sand in his eyes affecting his ability to duel, admitted defeat. "I concede this match," Binor uttered. Upon hearing Binor's words, Zich responded, beginning to speak. "Do you know why you're sure to lose?" he asked. "Because you're reckless and arrogant, and you're already afraid that you might end up killing the head of the clan you serve. If you don't forget today's fight, you'll advance even further, Binor." At this moment, the referee also started to announce, "The victory belongs to young Master Zich." Upon hearing this result, instead of applause, the audience above began to curse. How could he throw dirt into his eyes like that? It's cheating, damn it, dishonest fighting. There's no knightly spirit. Zich had no interest in arguing with these industrial chickens. Just winning is enough, he said. At the same time, Vordo was puzzled upstairs. Since when did Zich learn this magic technique? He could not be taught. The steward beside him explained slowly. The Duke. How can he naturally have been born? But Greg also began to tremble with worry. How could he still be okay after taking all of Binor's touch? Zich, that lowly scum. How outrageous. And as Greg continued to contemplate the problem, Zich shouted down below, "Greg, come out and fight. I told you, right? That time and place will be determined by me." Hearing this word, Greg became even more jittery. And Vordo at this time also asked him what he was saying. Zich didn't care about his question, but he continued to speak to Greg. "Are you trying to format stupid, Greg?" Then he turned back to Vordo and said, "You know the man who agreed to this fight, my dad." People in the stands started discussing rumors about a succession battle between young Master Zich and Greg, which turned out to be true. Who could have imagined that this duel would take place today? But why was he planning to fight in such a state? Where did he get his confidence? Seeing that Greg still hesitated to come down, Zich shouted, "What are you waiting for, Greg? Come down here. Are you still afraid of me?" Looking at Greg's hesitant posture, it was clear to everyone present that the rumors were true. Vordo, seeing Zich shout like that, began to get irritated and turned to Greg, urging him, "Greg, come down. Are you truly scared of Zich acting like this?" Unable to bear further humiliation, Greg reluctantly descended to accept the challenge. However, as he came down and saw Zich's confident demeanor, Greg became even more anxious. How could he be smiling like that? Everything from his expressions, gestures, and even his combat abilities, it was as if he wasn't the Zich he knew anymore. While Greg was still pondering, Zich suddenly said, "Greg, don't tell me you think I'm just going to stand here waiting for you to attack first. As your older brother, I have to lead by example." With that, Zich rushed forward. Greg, faced with Zich's overwhelming presence, could only show concern on his face. He quickly used his sword to fend off Zich's attacks, but then he realized something was wrong. He couldn't muster enough strength to counterattack. What the hell is this? I can't even muster enough strength to attack anymore. Greg realized. Of course, Dan despicable scoundrel Zich is just Zich after all. Greg, as the true heir to the Duke's title, began to push back against Zich. Zich, realizing that he couldn't win in a conventional fight with his current condition, which included serious injuries from Binor, knew he couldn't use any magic in his present state to win the match as quickly as possible. This is the only way, Zich thought to himself, beginning to laugh in a bizarre way. Then, Zich grabbed Greg's sword with his left hand, ignoring the damage it caused. Have you ever heard of a decisive battle with blood and flesh flying everywhere? Zich said afterward. Zich's hand also unleashed a mana stream, then broke Greg's sword directly. Seeing his sword broken, Greg started to be afraid. Over on this side, Zich continued to issue threats. If you don't surrender, you'll meet your end. Greg, right here, right now, after these words were spoken. Zich also used the hilt of his sword to strike Greg directly in the face, causing him to fall to the ground. Then Zich began to throw the broken piece of his sword right next to Greg's ear, while at the same time his body emitted a tremendous pressure. Seeing this scene, Greg was so frightened that he urinated blood and cried out, I surrender. As soon as those in authority heard this, they also began to declare Zich the winner. As for what happened next, most people already knew. Zich demanded the title of Earl because he had won the duel. But Vordo roared and argued that this duel did not decide anything. Zich knew this well, so he immediately threw the hare's ring back towards Vordo and declared that he would leave the family. Before leaving the arena, he did not forget to instruct his blood relative, Gray, to remember the lessons of how to always win the fight, not fear death, in order to protect Steelwill clan's border territories from being invaded by outside forces. Everyone present here had to be stronger to achieve that. After saying this, he also took the healing potion prepared for Gray, which was indeed of excellent quality. Just a few sips and all his wounds were completely healed. Don't forget the lesson I taught you today? Zich reminded those present from the Steelwill clan. With that, Zich left the arena and his family with ease. Of course, before leaving, he didn't forget to take along a misfit named Hand. Zich had coerced him into following by threatening to kill him immediately if he didn't comply. Thus, to save his life, Hand had no choice but to tag along. At the clan's gate, Zich casually tossed a large backpack to Hand and then contemplated, am I being too forgiving to someone who dared to oppose me in exchange for a little labor? Am I too kind? However, soon after, Zich began to observe Hand's trembling body, burdened by the weight of the bulky backpack. With this burden, Zich realized he needed to further strengthen Hand's physical endurance through training to make him more useful in the future. Afterwards, Zich also shared his plans with Hand. Currently, I don't have a fixed plan yet. But first, let's head to the neighboring territory. This marks the beginning of a new life for Zich, trying to be a good person in this lifetime. Not long after, they began to move into a forest. By now, even someone as clueless as Hand could sense that something wasn't right, so he asked Sir Zich, isn't this path meant for humans? Zich calmly replied, I know that if we go straight, we'll cut the journey by less than half. Why would I want to take the longer route? Hand hesitated for a moment and said, because if we venture out of human settlements, there will be many monsters. That's why we're here, right? Zich confirmed, that's right. And that's also why we're here. This answer dumbfounded Hand's face. Suddenly, from behind, there was a loud clang that made Hand quickly turn to look. I must have misheard, Hand reassured himself, while sweat started dripping down his forehead. As they ventured deeper into the forest, a coward like Hand became increasingly fearful. Every few steps, he had to turn his head twice to see if any monster would jump out to butcher them. I hope we can get through this place as quickly as possible, Hand thought to himself, now thoroughly frightened. But suddenly, Zich, who was walking ahead, abruptly stopped and turned to Hand. All right, your test begins now, he said, handing Hand a sword. Hand's face still full of confusion, he stuttered, I have to fight. While saying this, Hand turned back to look behind him in astonishment because now, behind him, there was a monster standing there from nowhere. But luckily for him, it was just a goblin, the weakest type of monster for rookies. Though Hand still had to face a monster barely 1.2 meters tall. He anxiously said to Zich, Sir Zich, I don't even know how to hold a sword. Can you at least give me a bigger one? Zich replied firmly, you'd better be content with that one. Before I give you a wooden stick, wouldn't a wooden stick be better? Meanwhile, the goblin started making strange noises and leaped towards Hand to attack. Being the coward he was, Hand just froze, letting it jump onto his head and started pounding it with his stick. Seeing this, Zich felt helpless. This will be a long process if I want to train him, he thought, to prevent Hand from being beaten to death by this weak goblin. Zich knocked it out with a punch. Afterwards, Hand got up, his face swollen, and complained, Why did you do that to me? Because you're too weak, Zich replied sternly. You can't just carry luggage when you're with me. You need to at least train to protect yourself. Saying this, Zich handed him a healing potion. I knocked out the goblin for you, but it will wake up soon. For the rest of that afternoon, after using up several healing potions, Hand finally had enough composure to face the goblin calmly. To gain an advantage in the fight, Hand rushed in for the first attack and attempted a thrust, but unfortunately, the goblin dodged it. Immediately after, it counterattacked with a swing of its stick, forcing Hand to hastily block with his hand, the impact making his face contort. The goblin then swung its stick again, but after a few rounds of this back and forth, Hand started getting used to its attack pattern. Just before the stick could hit his face again, Hand swiftly ducked to avoid the blow, surprising Zich, who was observing from the side. Did that clumsy guy actually dodge the goblin's attack? Zich muttered in slight surprise. In the end, Hand showed some aptitude. Returning to the fight, Hand suddenly accelerated, maneuvered behind the goblin, and took advantage of its distraction to skewer it with a decisive stab. Seeing the goblin collapse, Hand breathed a sigh of relief. "I won," he exclaimed joyously, looking up at the sky in celebration. Next to him, Zich also handed him a healing potion, saying, "That was beyond my expectations." "Thank you, Hand." Hand happily drank the potion. After finishing it, he continued, "It's all thanks to you, Zich." Suddenly, the potion slipped from Hand's hand because he witnessed a terrifying scene. They were surrounded by a horde of goblins. Hand turned pale, but Zich remained calm. He stooped down, picked up some stones from the ground, and began collecting them. Curious, Hand asked, "What are you going to do with those rocks?" Zich started throwing the rocks at the goblin horde with incredible speed, like a skilled marksman hitting each target accurately. After a series of shots, the entire goblin horde lay defeated on the ground. However, before Hand could even catch his breath, Zich spoke up again. "You look shocked. This is just the beginning." Perplexed, Hand replied, "What do you mean, just the beginning?" At that moment, Hand turned around and discovered behind them a group of large, powerful orcs. This sight petrified Hand even more. To worsen matters, Zich reassured him, "I have plenty of potions, so don't worry." Upon hearing this, Hand knew what his fate would likely be. By nightfall, they managed to defeat all the orcs, and Hand fell asleep like a log. Later, Zich remembered their morning conversation with Hand and asked, "By the way, why does Forel favor you so much? What's your relationship with her?" Hand hesitated a bit, then answered, My mother used to be Forel's lady's maid. Maybe that's why she always doted on me since I was little." Zich recalled something at that moment and began, "Come to think of it, I remember there was a young servant." Hand began to sob uncontrollably because he realized it was him, the grandson of Forel's former lady's maid, who had been mistreated by Zich's mother while raising Forel. Upon seeing Hand's tears, Zich suddenly asked, "Do you remember anything about my mother?" Hand was startled upon hearing this. Of course, she is an amazing person. She is kind to the underprivileged and respects those above her. She's sweet to everyone, Hand said, describing her as a perfect person. Unfortunately, the illustrations don't do justice to her words. By now, Zich had also come to understand that he had been disliked by the Count's family due to his mother. Considering all the wrongs she's done, he really feels sorry for entering the Count's family, but that doesn't mean he should feel guilty about it. Suddenly, Zich heard the sound of a horse-drawn carriage not far away. Quickly, he kicked Hand awake. Hand was still drowsy. "I didn't think it was dawn yet," Zich said. "Something is coming." Hearing this, Hand immediately became alert. "Is it goblins or orcs?" he asked. Then, the sound of the carriage began to grow louder, and it slowly moved towards them. Zich pushed Hand forward and ordered him to move ahead. This startled Hand, but he quickly regained his composure and asked, "Do you think it's a merchant?" Zich didn't think so. The carriage isn't as big as the sound of a blood horse. If it were a merchant's carriage, the horse's hooves would be attached to the carriage, so the sound would be similar. "So, is it a traveler like us?" Hand asked. Zich sighed at the foolish question and answered, "There's no traveler walking around with a horse-drawn carriage right now." Before the two had to guess, the sound came right in front of them. Leading the caravan were two knights. Then, right after that, a man stepped out of the car and said, "I apologize for your impoliteness. We also want to camp here overnight. I'm a disciple of Karna." The girl's face also surprised Zich because she was the holy Ain Luvella, who had made a significant contribution to sending Zich to register in his previous life. Unexpectedly, they met here. Of course, Luvella still doesn't know Zich afterwards. a man stepped forward from behind and introduced himself. I am Velwire, serving Miss Luvella as a candidate saint. Zich immediately recognized him. He's the one known as Tasnia's killing machine. In the future, both of them are formidable figures. But now, I've resolved to be a good person in this life, so everything should be fine. After acquainting himself with others from his past life, Zich extended a handshake and said, I've heard you'll be camping here tonight. Make yourselves comfortable. Thank you. Wire responded. We'll excuse ourselves for the night then. Zich was about to turn to Hand to ask why he hadn't introduced himself yet. But Hand swiftly kneeled at Luvella's feet and introduced himself. Hello, madam, I am Hand. This scene left Zich speechless. This guy's timid when fighting monsters, but lively around girls. He even volunteered to help set up camp to impress Luvella. Though embarrassed, Zich understood. Luvella's beauty was otherworldly after all. That scoundrel, Zich thought, he only recruits beautiful people for his team. Just as Zich was about to curse him further, Luvella's voice interrupted. Excuse me, can I sit here? Yes, Zich replied promptly. Luvella then sat down beside Zich, thanking him for allowing them to camp there for the night. It's nothing, Zich replied casually. Zich's type, he added quietly, causing an awkward atmosphere between them. Finally, Zich decided to break the tension. Why are you here? Is there something you need? Upon hearing the question, Luvella began to answer. I'm traveling to listen to people's stories. Whenever I meet someone in need, I offer them blessings. That's wonderful, Zich said sincerely. But before he could praise her further, Luvella hesitated. No, it's what a member of Karna should do. She then turned the question back to Zich. But why are you here? I'm trying to find a way to live as a good person, Zich realized. She might be the best person to give me advice, he thought, and asked her directly. Can you tell me how to be a good person? This question made Luvella a bit puzzled, and she responded by asking back. How to be a good person? Right, someone once said I must become a better person, but I feel you might be the best person to ask for advice. After Zich shared his story clearly, Luvella began to contemplate. Well, there are many ways, but are you good at anything? I'm good at things that require strength, Zich replied. Why don't you use that strength to help those in need? Luvella suggested. Upon hearing this, Zich also began to ponder her answer. Helping those in need. All right then. Tomorrow, I'll start looking for those who need help. The next morning, both groups parted ways and headed towards Porty in their respective directions. At this moment, Wire introduced himself to Luvella while walking. All the shops are under construction, he mentioned suddenly, then said to Luvella, Miss Luvella, I must quickly perform a duty. Please take care, Luvella replied, and after Wire left, they continued on their journey. Suddenly, within an alley, a terrified scream echoed, and with her saintly nature, Luvella couldn't ignore it. Someone's screaming over there. She immediately looked into the alley and said. The knight behind her quickly reminded her, Miss Luvella, let us check first. And as they ventured deeper, Luvella spotted ahead a young man surrounded and harassed by 4 thugs, with Zich being the instigator, not someone else. The scene shifted to the late afternoon at a certain house, where Luvella began to question Zich. I told you to help those in need, but can you really help the bad ones? Zich seemed a bit perplexed by her words, but they seemed to need help too. Hearing this, Luvella reluctantly switched to lecturing mode. That's not everything. Promise me from now on, you'll only help those who are in a weak position instead of using violence against good people. You need to apologize. The young man next to her quickly waved his hand. I'm fine. My name is Sudi. Thank you for saving me. After that, Sudi began to explain his story. The gang of thugs harassing him came from the Siren trading house. They had bribed the mayor with a huge amount of money. This place used to be just an old shop, but it holds a lot of memories for me and my father. So I told them I couldn't give up ownership of the shop, and that's when they started causing trouble. I don't know what to do now. After hearing this touching story, Luvella quickly comforted him and said, Don't worry, I'll go see the mayor of Porty right away. But the knight beside her quickly reminded her, Miss Luvella, You can't get involved in politics. However, Luvella remained steadfast in her determination, taught by Mrs. Kana. I can't ignore this. She then turned confidently to SUD and said, I'll handle this. Just leave it to me. After saying that, she immediately went to the mayor's mansion, causing the knights to hurriedly follow her. The next day, for some reason, even though it was late morning, Luvella still maintained a serious expression on her face. Even Hand couldn't smell this face. So he had to ask, What are you thinking? You look so upset. It was only now that Ziki had the opportunity to express his emotions. Do you think she was serious about helping the weak? I think she was wrong. Hand refused to answer when he heard this, but in his heart, he thought Zeke was the one who was wrong. For some reason, Zeke seemed to be able to read Hand's thoughts, so he patted him on the shoulder and continued, I'm a bit worried too. They haven't returned since yesterday. But suddenly, they noticed a noisy crowd ahead discussing some news urgently. It's an urgent warrant. She really killed the deputy mayor. It's horrible. At this point, Zeke also started to push in to find out what was happening. But soon his face froze because on the wanted poster was none other than Luvella's image. Wanted, Luvella, for the murder of the deputy mayor. The curse conspiracy has arrived. Even Hand was extremely puzzled when he saw this wanted poster. At this moment, Zeke also sensed something very strange because he was certain that Luvella could never do such a thing. Then the discussions of those around him caught his attention again. The witch from Carwoodman is terrifying because of her curse, which has thrown the entire city into chaos. The sun is setting, so we should go back before we run into them. What are you all doing? Hurry back home, someone shouted. After this statement, everyone rushed back to their homes. Even after returning home, they closed their windows tightly, as if guarding against something. In less than 30 seconds, the streets were deserted, which made Hand somewhat anxious because it seemed like they were the only ones who didn't know what was going on. What's happening, Zeke? There must be something strange going on here. We should leave, Zeke said. After that, the two of them started to leave this place to return to their inn. The deserted streets, along with the eerie atmosphere, made Hand even more fearful and cautious. At this moment, Zeke was also reviewing his memories before he was revived. Has anything similar happened before? Luvella as a murderer? No way, he thought. None of this makes sense, whether it's the curse in Porty or Luvella killing someone. Has everything changed because I've met Luvella? While Zeke was still pondering, Hand began to cling to Zeke's arm and whispered, Zeke, I think someone is following us. At this, Zeke turned his head to observe and indeed discovered someone trailing behind them. This shadow began to emit growls unlike human sounds, slowly advancing towards them. Wait! Is this a zombie? Hand stammered, horrified. Without letting Hand fear any longer, Zeke immediately advanced with his sword drawn towards this zombie-like figure. As he looked at the creature's head, it started to roll and tumble on the ground. Hand began to worry and wonder why there were undead in Porty. Zeke's face also turned serious, adding to the uneasy feeling. Shortly after, on their way back, they encountered two guards who took custody of the undead creature from them. Thankfully, no one was hurt. The guards commended them for their good deed and advised them to leave before getting cursed by witches. After these words, the guards handed them a torch as a token of gratitude and promptly departed. Having to constantly hear about curses from witches shook Hand's confidence. He then asked Zeke if he believed Lady Luvella was truly a witch. Zeke confidently replied, No way. How could that be true? I'm sure she's innocent in this matter. This statement only deepened Hand's curiosity. How did Zeke know for sure that she was being framed? Zeke paused suddenly, realizing he shouldn't say more, which only intrigued Hand further. Zeke's evasiveness made Hand more suspicious. Was there something Zeke knew about Luvella? Zeke tried to divert the conversation, saying, Isn't it obvious from her face that she's a good person? Hand seemed to understand Zeke's point, realizing Zeke was someone who judged by appearances but was startled when Zeke suddenly heard a noise. Zeke quickly turned to look behind Hand, clearly searching for something. Confused, Hand couldn't understand what Zeke was looking for until Zeke abruptly started running forward, following the sound he heard. As they reached an alley, Zeke spotted someone familiar sitting there, looking disheveled. "Why are you here, all dirty like this?" Zeke exclaimed. Hand caught up and was surprised to see that it was indeed Luvella, her face stained with tears. So after that, both of them started taking Luvella back to her lodging and waited. After Luvella had bathed and changed into clean clothes, Zeke asked, "Are you comfortable in those clothes?" Luvella nodded, saying they were very comfortable. Zeke then continued, "Hand will go out to buy dinner soon. Those knights who were with you, where did they go?" Luvella replied, "They went on another mission." Upon hearing this, Luvella lowered her head in sorrow, tears welling up. Across from her, Zeke placed a wanted poster on the table and asked, "Is this related to this?" Seeing this, Luvella hurriedly explained, "I'm not a witch, I promise." Zeke responded, "I know you're not." Luvella, surprised by his trust, asked, "Why do you believe me?" Zeke replied seriously, "Because you wouldn't do something like this. Tell me what really happened to you on the day we didn't go together." Luvella then began slowly recounting the events of that day. After arriving at the mayor's mansion, the conversation went smoothly, unlike with Mayor Thamlam, a reliable deputy mayor, who assured them he would personally handle the matter. However, prompted by the deputy mayor's reminder, the mayor may have realized how difficult the situation had become and prepared dinner for Luvella's group. Luvella herself had intended to decline, but the knights were all hungry, so she accepted the invitation. When the knights sat down to eat, they devoured their meals like starving wolves, an outcome Luvella regretted for her sudden arrival and the abrupt end of the dinner. They had just started to express their gratitude to the mayor after the dinner when they suddenly witnessed a horrific scene as they entered the mayor's room. The deputy mayor had been killed by the mayor. And not only had he but also many others were lying at the mayor's feet. It seemed that the mayor had used some form of dark magic to take away the lives of those who had seen something they shouldn't have, the mayor said in a chilling tone. At this point, a knight beside Luvella suddenly realized something and immediately exclaimed, "Miss Luvella, that is a statue of Vald." Everyone's gaze shifted inside the room, where a statue of a demon was floating in midair. So Luvella began to understand the situation and immediately said, "He's Vald's puppet." The mayor did not deny it and admitted directly, "Now you realize, huh?" Hearing this, Luvella started to worry and asked, "What do you intend to do?" The mayor's face turned manic as he replied, "Of course, I will sacrifice you all to the great Vald." After saying this, he began controlling the undead corpses at his feet to attack Luvella's group. The knights immediately entered combat mode as soon as the undead started rushing in. One undead was swiftly cut down by a knight's sword. Meanwhile, Luvella began using her magic blessings to enhance the knight's strength. Despite her efforts, Luvella became increasingly worried. "I can't handle all of them," she thought, merely managing to hold them back. At this moment, a knight in front sensed her distress and quickly turned to ask, "Miss Luvella, are you okay?" Before she could respond, another undead attacked from behind. Reacting swiftly, the knight grabbed her and threw her backward. Behind them, it seemed the knights were holding off the undead to allow her to escape. After hearing her story, Zeke asked, "Is this Vald I'm thinking of?" He continued, "I think another cult seeks destruction and chaos, worshipping the dark deity Vald, often committing murder and terrorism." This only deepened Zeke's curiosity about what they were doing in this place. Luvella made a conjecture, "It's just a guess, but I think they're planning a ritual. I saw another inscription on the statue behind the mayor, which read, 'I offer this city to Vald.'" Zeke listened intently as she explained, "They're trying to use the entire city as an offering." Upon hearing this, Zeke pondered aloud, "If that's what they're doing." Luvella quickly asked, "Do you know anything else?" She added, "They often place statues of Vald throughout the city and sacrifice bodies to these statues. The book the mayor was holding could be a catalyst to activate energy from the statue." And then Luvella added, "After escaping from the mansion, I tried to send a distress signal to Karna, but the city had already been sealed off. I need to do something to stop this ritual." While saying this, Luvella held her head in despair. But soon after, her face lit up upon hearing Zeke's voice. "I'll help you because it's the right thing to do," Zeke said. Upon hearing this, Luvella felt relieved, but then began to worry. but I'm concerned that you might be in danger if you get involved in this. Zich brushed off her concerns. Don't worry. We'll go to the mayor's mansion tomorrow night. For now, you should go to your room. With that said, Zich opened the door and left. Outside, he noticed Hand eavesdropping. When did you start listening, Hand? Zich asked, catching him off guard. Young master, I wasn't eavesdropping, I swear, Hand replied nervously. But Zich didn't have time to reprimand him, as he had important tasks for him. Just when there's something important to do, you'll be like that, Zich muttered to Hand. The next evening, Zich and Luvella began their infiltration of the mayor's mansion, knocking out a few guards along the way. They entered through the second-floor balcony, with Luvella guiding the way. Their target was the room containing the statue. After passing through several corridors, they finally arrived at their destination. This is where Vald's statue is kept, Zich whispered uncomfortably, even though they were still outside. Then both of them began to open the door and step inside. Inside the room, someone was already waiting. Zich noticed and asked, "Is this the mayor, the bald old man?" Hearing this, Luvella looked at him angrily and said, "Yes, he's the one who killed the deputy mayor." Zich didn't hesitate and immediately drew his sword, rushing forward swiftly. Soon after, Zich's sword was pressed against the old man's neck. But suddenly, Zich noticed something and began to inspect it again. Seeing this from behind, Luvella worriedly said, "Be careful, sir. He might summon the undead." "You're mistaken, Miss Luvella. He's not behind this," Zich replied as he kicked the man. And then the man fell to the ground, now just a lifeless body. At that moment, a terrifying black mist also emanated from his mouth. Both of them turned their attention towards the source of the sudden surge of energy, eager to understand its implications. Zich soon identified the figure responsible, confirming their suspicions. Meanwhile, a man stood outside, his voice breaking the tense silence. "I never thought you'd return on your own," he remarked. Zich recognized him as someone unfamiliar, but Luvella recognized him instantly as the deceased deputy mayor. Seeing him alive was both shocking and unsettling. "Mayor," Luvella exclaimed, unable to contain her surprise. "But he's supposed to be dead," Zich interjected. "I'm certain of it. I don't understand what's happening." Luvella, however, noticed something peculiar: the book in the mayor's hand. Without hesitation, the mayor explained its significance, dispelling any confusion. "This is the tome imbued with Vald's dark power," he declared. "Its official name is the key to the ritual sacrifice." "Miss Luvella," he addressed her directly, prompting Zich to finally grasp the unfolding events. "Now it all makes sense," Zich muttered. "The mayor must have reluctantly obeyed someone's orders before his demise. He wasn't Vald's servant, but merely a puppet of the other deputy mayor." Luvella's expression shifted to one of concern. "What about the knights? What have you done with them?" The deputy mayor chuckled callously. "You needn't worry. I've disposed of them, their bodies now feeding the fishes." Luvella's face paled at the fate of their comrades. Meanwhile, the deputy mayor muttered to himself, questioning Zich's true identity. "Is he one of Karn's clandestine guardians?" "No," Zich replied firmly. "I have no ties to the Carwoodman Guild or any other." "Why then are you here?" the deputy mayor pressed. But before he could respond, Zich's words cut through the air, sparking fury. "I don't think a fool who believes in nonsense needs to know. Such lines are for cultists. A fool like you seems eager to be punished by Vald, am I right?" The deputy mayor tightened his grip in response, his expression darkening with each passing moment. Meanwhile, Zich continued absent-mindedly digging his ear, as if nothing had happened. "Do you think I'm crazy? Do you think I'll receive punishment from such a petty fish?" These words enraged the mayor to the peak. "There's no need for negotiation at this point, or any begging," he continued. Then the book in his hand began to glow, and he spoke. "Very well. I will make him repent in the utmost agony before he's killed." After saying this, his whole body also began to emit a terrifying mana stream. Following that, corpses began to appear behind him. "He killed that guy to save the woman, so I have a way to use her." The mayor then began commanding his own horde of undead, and right after that, the entire group began to rush forward to attack the undead. Seeing this, Luvella quickly used her blessing to enhance Zeke's strength, and in that moment, Zeke's spirit responded to her divine power. Zeke's eyes lit up, and then his strength surged rapidly. With just a slight dodge, he was able to evade the attacks of these undead, and while still being enhanced in strength, he used his speed and agility. For each undead he struck. The combined power of his dragon spirit and divine strength was utterly formidable. It could be said that he struck where it counted. No undead could withstand Zeke's second blow, and even the mayor at the entrance was shocked. He defeated the undead so easily. At the same time, after Zeke had subdued all the undead in the room, he began to feel abundant power within his body. It seems like his magic has returned somewhat. Then Zeke turned to disdain the mayor, saying, "Is that all? You're not planning to call a few more monsters?" These words further infuriated the mayor, who arrogantly thought his preparations for the ritual were complete. But Zeke replied calmly, "I'm not going to listen to that." Zeke's words made the deputy mayor stiffen. "You see, we've found and destroyed all of Val's statues in Porty," Zeke said. The deputy mayor initially suspected Zeke of some serious trickery, but upon hearing those words, he sighed with relief. He thought that even if you destroyed the statues, it wouldn't change anything. Zeke continued confidently. But Zeke added, "If a Carwidman priest especially activates the statues, the ritual's power will diminish." These words truly left the deputy mayor speechless, unable to explain further. On their side, Luvella, who always accompanied Zeke, also wondered, "Is that so?" "That's right. After destroying all the statues in the party, all I had to do was come and destroy that thing," Zeke said while looking up at the statue floating in midair. At this moment, the deputy mayor realized that if he didn't stop these two, his plan would immediately collapse. So he quickly ordered the other undead to capture those wretched ones. However, no matter how many of those weak chickens they called out, they all died just as soon as Zeke struck them twice. Seeing this, the deputy mayor shouted for his underlings to come up, but before they could even fight for 3 seconds, they had already gone to the haunted house. However, right after that, Zeke decided not to fight anymore because his stamina was running out. So he picked up Luvella and warned her, "You might get hurt, so don't move. We'll escape from here." Hearing this, Luvella was a little worried, but since the main gate was blocked, they only needed to go through the side door, which was the window path here. Immediately, Zeke ran towards the nearest window and used his back to break the glass. When the deputy mayor saw that they had escaped, he could still smile. "You run, huh? Well then, we should change our plans a bit, shouldn't we?" The next morning, Zeke's picture was featured in the newspaper. Hot news indeed. "Which Luvella killed the mayor?" the headline read. This sparked a lively debate among the people, who couldn't believe she had actually killed the mayor. It was truly horrifying. But then, suddenly, the two of them noticed Rich's picture and wondered, "Who is this person? I don't know, but from his appearance, he seems to be the witch's henchman." So, after that, Zeke pulled Luvella into an alley and proudly boasted about making it into the paper. At this point, he started feeling a bit conceited. "Haha, that's great. I look handsome no matter how they draw me," he said. But Luvella, standing beside him, didn't hear it that way. "This picture looks like you, Zeke, but it's a bit strange," she remarked. Surely, the deputy mayor had seen his face, but didn't understand why he portrayed him like this. Zeke, still munching on bread, commented, "I think he was just lazy." After eating, he conveniently threw it out. At the same time, he told Luvella, "Don't worry anymore, just eat. We have to move soon." Luvella started to wonder where he got the food. "Oh, I borrowed it from there," Rich said, pointing to a nearby bread stall. Luvella was bewildered. "Did you steal it?" she asked. Zeke reluctantly admitted, "I had no choice because I couldn't buy it in my current situation." After hearing Zeke's confirmation, Luvella slumped down in dismay. A saint had just become an accomplice to this. Seeing her getting upset, Zeke tried to pacify her. "Don't be angry, I didn't steal it. I recorded everywhere I took things from." But Luvella remained discontented. "It's still not right. You should ask for the owner's permission," she insisted, adhering strictly to societal norms. Zeke's attempt to reassure Luvella fell short as she continued to pout, clearly unsatisfied. At this point, Zeke decided to play his final card. What if I go back and pay them double? Immediately, Luvella tentatively agreed. But then she asked, wait, where did Han go? I sent him to do a few odd jobs, no need to worry. So where are we going now? Luvella asked while eating her bread. We need to find the hidden statues around the village. Any idea how to find them? Let's head to the slums first. I have a clever idea of where they might be hidden, Zeke replied. So they proceeded to the slums, and the first thing they did was search for these three individuals. Long time no see, Zeke's voice echoed, catching their attention. The three were astonished upon seeing both of them. I always knew he was the witch's puppet, one exclaimed. Let's just run. They started running away. But unfortunately for them, Zeke used a bit of force to jump ahead and block their path. What do you guys think? I'm going to kill you. Zeke said with a mysterious smile, sending chills down their spines. Then, Zeke dragged both of them in front of Luvella. It was then that she recognized them as the ones who had attacked the merchant earlier. However, Zeke realized one was still missing. He turned around and spoke to someone behind. Do you have no loyalty to your friends? This statement forced the fleeing person to stop. Damn it, because of what reason? He asked. How can wanted criminals like you just roam around like this? Zeke replied casually. When they heard this, Zeke calmly said, Don't worry about us. Help us a bit, will you? I'm looking for someone. The person shrugged dismissively. Help you? No way, not for free. Of course, I'm not saying it'll be free. Zeke continued, pulling out a pouch of gold coins. I'll reward you handsomely. As soon as they saw the money, their eyes glittered like hungry puppies. Earlier, they had sworn to live and die without helping, but now they were tempted by the sight of the coins. At this point, Zeke, seeing these individuals obediently complying, began to inquire, has anyone been sick or suddenly died recently? Like their life force has been completely drained. The leader with the golden head, upon hearing this question, started to darken his face, as if he knew something. Adding to the tension, the other two cronies stared intently at him, as if urging him to speak. In the expectant gazes of everyone, the leader with the golden head finally turned his head and said, I don't know. This response caused the other two cronies to widen their eyes in shock. Even Zeke, by now, was starting to get irritated. I offered you so much money already. Why are you behaving like this? After saying this, he casually grabbed the leader by the collar and continued questioning. You still don't know. While the two cronies were still hesitating, Luvella, from behind, began to kneel down. Please, I know it's hard to believe, but this city is facing a huge danger. If things continue like this, it will become a dead city. There have been many undead wandering around at night. Who knows when something even more terrifying will happen? Just as Luvella finished saying this, the leader with the golden head angrily shouted, Isn't it because of you people that those undead exist? And if it weren't for that witch, my brother wouldn't be in the state he is now. Zeke immediately seized upon this information. I think the person we're looking for is your brother. Lead me to your house, he said. But upon hearing this, the leader with the golden head became even more enraged. No, what will you do to him? Zeke, who had been increasingly frustrated with this person's lack of cooperation, immediately grabbed his head and forcefully dragged him towards their house. In Luvella's frightened eyes, perhaps she had never witnessed someone pleading for help in such a manner. Not long after, they arrived at the dilapidated house of this person. There, they also saw the brother in critical condition. I've done everything I can, but he won't recover unless we find the source of this illness. Who did this to him? Luvella asked. Zeke also wondered, has your brother recently interacted with anyone? Yes, I saw him, said the leader with the golden head. Zeke asked again, you saw him? Yes, it was him. The miserable scoundrel. That merchant we almost got, said the golden-headed one, then began to recount what had happened. A few days ago, he returned home later than usual and found his younger brother missing. The boy was quite frail, and because both lived in a slum without guards, he worried the boy might have run into trouble. He quickly went to search for his brother and discovered some mysterious figure attacking him with a knife. After a scuffle, the golden-headed man got a clear look at the attacker. It was that merchant we almost caught before. So since then, the boy has been in this state, he concluded. Yes, Zeke agreed. Initially, the boy wasn't injured anywhere and woke up soon after. So I thought he'd be fine. But gradually, he grew weaker and weaker, almost like he was losing his vitality. Zeke then asked, "So, you asked me for help right when we first met because of this?" "That's right. I intended to steal back the dagger he used to stab my brother and made a deal to exchange it for finding a way to cure my brother. Of course, it all fell apart because of some official person's plans," the man explained. Luvella, listening nearby, immediately grasped the implications of these words, sensing the sarcasm, but could only say, "I'm sorry, I misunderstood you. I simply thought a weak person was being beaten." However, these words only seemed to anger the man with the golden hair even more. He continued to barrage Luvella with questions. "Was it just because we attacked him? Or because I'm poor? Because I look like a thug? Are these all your reasons for distinguishing between weak and strong?" These questions left Luvella deeply troubled and unsure how to answer. In the end, Zeke stepped forward to ease the tension. He clapped his hands together to draw everyone's attention and said, "All right, that's enough. She's just living the life of a noble and doesn't have much experience. Let's try to understand her." As Zeke spoke, he also placed a comforting hand on the man's shoulder. Despite Zeke's efforts, the man with the golden head still wore a displeased expression. It seemed this was not something that could be easily brushed aside. Meanwhile, Zeke had a question on his mind. "Why don't you hate me?" Zeke asked the man with the golden head, who seemed a bit puzzled by the question. So Zeke had to explain, I betrayed you after she showed up. Shouldn't you hate me too?" The man with the golden head on this side felt a bit awkward and replied, "Because it was the first time someone said they would help me without any conditions." After saying this, he looked somewhat embarrassed. Meanwhile, Zeke beside him exclaimed in surprise. Shortly after ensuring that his younger brother's condition was temporarily stable, both of them began to leave the house. At this point, Zeke began to ask, "What do you think about this, Luvella?" Luvella, upon hearing this, began to stroke her chin in thought before saying, "While treating him, instead of vitality, I sensed the disgusting energy source of Vald. I suspect he is a follower of Vald." Upon hearing this, Zeke decided, "Then I guess we have to start from there." Luvella, upon hearing this, immediately asked, "What did you find out?" "Yeah, let's go there first, and the destination for both of us is the house of this soon-to-be merchant," said Zeke. At this point, he was still happily arranging his belongings without knowing that something terrible was about to happen to him. Suddenly, there was a very loud, strange noise that caught his attention. So he started opening his basement and went down to check. "How strange, just a mouse," he muttered. And at this moment, Zeke suddenly appeared from somewhere, draping his arm over his shoulder and saying, "It's been a while since we last met, hasn't it?" The appearance of Zeke caused the man to start becoming red-faced. What is he doing here? But before he could think much about it, Zeke delivered some bad news. "Prepare to be humiliated by the end of the day. Don't worry about someone bothering us like last time." Afterwards, Zeke leaned closer to his ear and whispered, "You see her, don't you? The angel who protected her has returned today as an angel of hell to punish you." Then the official interrogation and beating began. With just one kick, Zeke almost rolled towards the statue, but the crab head ate many punches and still didn't wake up. He still wonders, "Why are you doing this to me?" "Who knows? Why not ask the fish behind him?" Zeke said with a sarcastic tone. But after he finished this sentence, seeing that he didn't react, he kicked him a few more times. Still don't know. 2 more slaps now. Soon he knew that he could spend his life if he could not explain it. So he hurriedly said, "Wait, you don't think I'm a follower of Vald, do you?" "I'm not a follower of Vald." Zeke heard this answer and was not surprised at all. "I know you're not a follower. You're a miserable bastard who clings to a Vald follower just hoping to get a little bit of bread." These words were aimed at Tesudi, making him grind his teeth harder and harder. On this side, Luvella just silently watched how Zeke handled the problem, but then her eyes began to bulge, because now Zeke was slowly pulling out his sword. "Wait, Zeke, why are you drawing your sword?" Luvella asked with concern in her voice. Zeke heard this and said, Now that we've found that damn statue, we don't need this guy anymore. After hearing this, Luvella's face still showed hesitation. It seemed that witnessing someone being killed in front of her was still something too unexpected. But even so, she didn't speak up to stop it. Below, Suid also realized that if he couldn't say something useful now, his life today was as good as over. So after a few seconds of thinking hard, he said, I know where the other statues are located. This genuinely piqued Zeke's interest, prompting him to grab the collar of this person and ask, where is it? By now, Sudi knew he had guessed correctly. With this information, he would be temporarily safe. In fact, he grew even more arrogant and retorted, how can I simply tell you like that? He then began to retaliate against Zeke, saying, if you even lay a finger on me, I won't tell you where the statues are. Upon hearing this, Zeke began to look at him as though he were staring at a fool. What does it mean when someone looks at me like that? Finally, Sudi seemed to grasp the current situation. So, you finally understood the predicament you're in, you foolish vagrant. I should have disposed of you and your wretched gang in the slums much sooner. Upon hearing this, I truly had to admire Sudi's intelligence. Where did he find the courage to speak such words? Meanwhile, his words deeply shocked Luvella. Is this truly who you are? Upon hearing this, he turned to Luvella with a disgustingly smile. Do you still think I'm that knave fool? That's why people call you a witch. His words only made Luvella more puzzled. Why would you do this? You even said you don't worship Vald. Sudi chuckled upon hearing this. For money, of course. I was paid a hefty sum just to imbue life force into the statue. Who would refuse such a lucrative offer? The dilapidated and worthless nature of this old shop and the time spent in this makeshift place, all were due to my father and grandfather. This is my opportunity to put an end to it all. Upon hearing these words, Luvella's face turned deep purple. Perhaps this was the first time she truly saw someone's true nature. Meanwhile, he continued, I've dragged this on for too long. Now leave me be, and I'll tell you the location of the Vald statues once I'm out of here. Subid said confidently, convinced he had the upper hand. But unfortunately for him, Zeke coldly responded, Oh, I've changed my mind. These words stiffened Subid's face, and the smile faded from his lips. Zeke also began to brandish the knife in his hand and said, You'll die right now. These words stunned Sud into silence, as if he couldn't believe his ears. What if it weren't for me? Those Vald statues. But before he could finish, Zeke interrupted him. I can find them without you. You don't even know their locations, do you? As he spoke, Zeke grabbed him by the collar and lifted him off the ground. Zeke's face was now full of menace, and Sevi realized he wasn't joking. Desperately, he turned to plead with Luvella. Lady Luvella, save me. Please help me. I'm not the one in the weaker position here. Isn't the Karna Guild supposed to protect the vulnerable? However, his earlier words didn't convey such humility. At this point, Zeke also glanced at Luvella, waiting to see her reaction. In this situation, he continued to plead for forgiveness. His words made Luvella tremble, but she took a deep breath and coldly said, Kill him. Her words were like a death sentence, causing Sudi's face to turn purple. Upon hearing Luvella's decision, Zeke hesitated no longer. He slowly raised the sword in his hand, amidst Sudi's screams and pleas. Luvella even turned away, unwilling to witness the scene. But then, Zeke's voice rang out again, causing her to startle, Never let me see you again. It turned out that Zeke hadn't finished off Sudi, only injuring his hand as a punishment. Afterward, both of them returned to the blonde-haired man's house. This would serve as their temporary refuge. Meanwhile, Luvella's mind was filled with countless thoughts after witnessing everything that had unfolded. Zeke also realized that her mind was in turmoil, so he approached her and asked gently, Are you okay? As he spoke, Zeke handed her a sandwich, its origins unknown, whether stolen or bought. Upon hearing Zeke's question, she looked up and said, I've been making constant misjudgments. I believe the opposite faction based solely on hearsay. I thought the mayor's business was a setup. Madame always warned me not to be deceived by that guy. As she spoke, her face grew even paler. Zeke saw this and comforted her, feeling guilty, Huh? I'm fine, so you don't need to blame yourself. These words somewhat stabilized Luvella's spirits. She then apologized. I guess this time I need advice from you. Hearing this, Zich casually replied while chewing his sandwich, Me. I don't have any advice. You'll have to figure it out yourself. Whatever you do, time will heal all wounds. Self-torment won't achieve anything except suffering. He added with wise, experienced words that surprised Luvella. You're much more mature than I imagined, she commented. Later, Luvella suggested, So, shall we go look for other statues now? Yeah, I roughly know where they are, Zich replied. Upon hearing this, a hint of sadness appeared on Luvella's face. She apologized again. I'm sorry. I can't help. What do you mean? Zich responded. From now on, you'll take the lead. This statement surprised Luvella a bit. That evening, they once again infiltrated somewhere, knocked out the guards, and approached a room containing a statue. At this point, Luvella wondered how he knew it would be here. Zich explained, because these guys are hired with money, like Sevdi. Now all you need to do is transfer your divine energy into this palm tree and paint. Upon hearing Zich's instructions, Luvella quickly took the palm tree, infused it with her divine energy, and handed it back to Zich. Zich then swiftly drew symbols all over the statue, making it appear slightly more naive. Finally, he asked Luvella to transfer her divine energy into the statue once more. However, this simplicity worried Luvella. Is it really enough to leave it like this? Yeah, it's fine. The divine energy has been absorbed. Let's move on, Zich reassured her. With that, Zich turned and left, while Luvella hesitated, looking at the statue and pondering, can this really prevent the ritual? At the same time, somewhere else, Wire was carrying Hand, running as fast as he could, making Hand almost vomit. I'm falling. But suddenly, Wire realized something, so he didn't hesitate to throw Hand on the ground and said, Sorry, I have to go ahead. With that, he swiftly departed like the wind. Hand, still puzzled, wondered, why did Wire suddenly leave me here? How could he just abandon me? Suddenly, Hand felt a chill, as if countless eyes were staring at him from behind. This frightened him deeply, prompting him to hastily chase after Wire. Back at Zich's location, Luvella was deep in thought. She questioned whether what they were doing now was right. I've been searching for these statues and following Zich's instructions, but I don't understand the ancient scripts he paints on them. As she pondered this, a low growl echoed ahead, catching her attention. It's been a while since we've encountered these undead, she remarked. He looks a bit different this time, doesn't he? Zich also noticed the sluggish demeanor of this undead and remarked, upon reflection, he seems slower and walks more strangely than before. Thank goodness our efforts seem to be working. As he spoke, Zich swiftly knocked out the undead. The number of wandering undead throughout the city, influenced by the ritual, has certainly decreased. This is all thanks to you, Lady Luvella. Hearing this, Luvella was overwhelmed with joy and tears. She clasped her hands together and thanked the heavens. This is truly fortunate. Zich, standing beside her, also felt pleased. Your expression isn't that excited, he noted, noticing Luvella's preoccupation with the ancient scripts. You were quite concerned about those glyphs, weren't you? Zich's words startled Luvella, who felt a bit embarrassed. I'm sorry, it's not that I don't trust you. I've just never heard of this method in Carwidman. But I can't believe it's so powerful. The creator of these ancient scripts must be a genius. You think so? Zich responded. It's almost time we deal with the key statue at the mayor's house. Listening to this, Luvella began to worry if everything would be all right. Zich, however, remained confident and said, We've destroyed all the statues in Porty over the past few days, so the power of the ritual must have weakened considerably. The deputy mayor is probably at the mayor's house, and it's very likely he's planning to use it as the focal point of the ritual. Deciding swiftly, Zich said, Let's go then. And once again, they began to infiltrate the mayor's mansion. Relying on Luvella's sensing abilities, they found the room where the statue was located. I can clearly feel unusual energy behind this door, Luvella remarked. Zich then instructed her, Madame Luvella, please stay back. Let me lead the way. With that, Zich slowly began to open the door. But unexpectedly, before the door could fully open, a magical attack came flying out from inside. This sudden strike startled them both, but fortunately, it missed. "That attack really caught me off guard," Zeke commented. Behind him, Luvella worriedly asked, "Are you all right?" Zeke chuckled and reassured her, "I'm fine. That feeble attack means nothing. What's more important is that I can't sense their presence." Zeke's gaze turned towards the entrance where two shadowy figures floated with scythes in hand. Seeing their forms, Luvella gasped in horror. How can high-level monsters be here? Meanwhile, the shadow across from Zeke, after seeing that the two were unharmed by the initial attack, launched another assault. This time, however, their attack was easily blocked and countered. "That was quite surprising," Zeke mused. "I expected them to be more skilled since they're assassins." With that, Zeke swiftly disarmed one with his sword and dispatched them both with a few precise strikes. He then pondered aloud, why would assassin-class creatures engage in direct combat like this? Suddenly, at his feet, the shadow began to elongate and something started emerging from within. Sensing danger, Luvella quickly warned Zeke from behind. Turning around, Zeke discovered a Jawi preparing to ambush him. But even this wasn't enough to trouble a demon lord like Zeke. "Your assassination skills aren't bad," he remarked calmly, "but facing me is a different story." With that, Zeke swiftly struck down the Jawi. After seeing both Jawi eliminated, Zeke pondered, these creatures shouldn't be underestimated. At this moment, Luvella began to worry and asked, "What's going on here? How can Jawi appear here?" Zeke speculated, it must be that Vald has summoned them. This only deepened Luvella's confusion. "But I thought the ritual had weakened visibly." Just then, a voice boomed, answering her question. "The answer isn't just one thing. Why hasn't our ritual weakened at all?" With these words, the entire building began to tremble violently. Pieces of it started falling from the ceiling. Zeke quickly understood the situation. The building was collapsing. It seems this was just the facade of the ritual. These words shocked Luvella. "What does that mean? Are you saying everything we've done had no effect at all?" "Of course not," Zeke reassured her. "First, we need to get out of here." With that, Zeke enveloped his sword with his mana, stabbed it into the ground, and created a shockwave that blasted through the front wall, causing it to explode. "Hold on tight," Zeke said as he grabbed Luvella's waist, and they jumped out of the building just before it exploded. However, outside, they faced an even greater threat. It seemed the ritual was nearing completion. Despite the building's collapse from the earthquake, the statue of the demon Lord Vald remained suspended. Worse, it was emitting an even more terrifying aura. Meanwhile, the two masterminds behind the deputy mayor spoke from behind. "Isn't this a beautiful sight?" Ald Grotham remarked. Hearing his voice, Luvella turned back towards him. Ald continued, his face filled with satisfaction. "I don't mind the title, but why don't you address me by name from now on? My name is Ald Grotham." He grinned, thoroughly pleased with what he had achieved. "I have a feeling the ritual was momentarily disrupted, but your scribbles on the statue had no effect whatsoever." Luvella, upon hearing this, was curious how Ald knew so much. Ald explained, "I had soldiers stationed around the area to guide you to the statue, ensuring you'd find your own way here. It wasn't easy to bring you here by force, so I made sure you believed you had succeeded in completely thwarting the ritual. I thought you would come to destroy the final statue, especially after I overheard that he planned to destroy the others and return." Zeke interjected, asking if Alad had eavesdropped. Alad didn't answer directly but continued explaining his plan proudly. "You should be grateful. I put considerable effort into framing the wanted notice to make it easier for both of you. Just a few hours from now, the city's people will become our loyal army. Therefore, the military attitude for me is..." Interrupting, Alad extended his hand to greet Luvella. However, hearing Alad's plan, Luvella lightly bit her lip and firmly declared, "I won't let you have your way." Hearing this, Alad understood that negotiations were over and began to exert his power. "You leave me no choice. I'll have to resort to force." "Just as you say," Alad began, sending undead to surround them both. In such dire moments, people often say farewell, and Luvella was no exception. Thank you, Zeke, for everything, she said gratefully. Zeke, wondering aloud what would have happened without him, urged Luvella to run. I'll try to hold him off with all my strength. Zeke continued confidently, You're thanking me instead of blaming me for giving hope. Alad interrupted, breaking the emotional conversation between the two. If you don't know anything, don't pretend you do, he interjected. Despite this, Zeke remained composed. But I do know one thing, he retorted, that the foolish sealing spell I drew won't work at all, and you helped us bring Luvella to you. Upon hearing this, Alad became visibly flustered. Is that really so? Why would you act as if I wanted this? Zeke calmly replied, I need time, Alad. Alad was still in surprise, not yet understanding the meaning of these words. Then, a loud explosion echoed from behind. This explosion also put Zeke at ease, because the person he was looking for was approaching. We need to buy some time for him, Zeke said casually. But I guess you don't know who he's talking about. Who? Alad replied. The notorious killing machine, Velwire, Zeke stated. Your days are numbered with him. Upon hearing this name, Alad's face filled with confusion. Sweat poured down like Velwire River. He can't possibly come back. He must have left the city already, Alad thought. I told him to come back, Zeke said nonchalantly, which infuriated Alad. At that moment, Alad knew it was game over. He put all his strength into using the power of the book in his hand. No matter how strong Velwire was, he would be powerless against the ritual. The book in Alad's hand glowed brightly, and suddenly, a massive column of water erupted behind Zeke and Luvella. The water formed into the shape of a giant serpent. Zeke instructed Luvella not to panic but to stay behind him. However, Luvella wasn't just there for show. She immediately used her divine power to enhance Zeke's strength. I am a candidate for the divine successor of Carwidman. I will fight, she declared firmly. Zeke smiled confidently at her words and prepared for battle. Meanwhile, the giant serpent of water approached them. It opened its mouth wide, as if to swallow both of them whole. Zeke raised his sword high and thrust it into the serpent's throat, causing a massive explosion. Seeing this, Alad turned away, thinking the battle was over. However, Alad couldn't resist making a final comment. That blow must have depleted your magical power, but it's quite satisfying. No one could survive that. Before Alad could finish his sentence, Zeke interrupted, Is that all? With that, Zeke and Luvella stepped out from within the curtain of water. Alad was astonished at the scene, gaping in disbelief. How could someone survive a direct hit like that? In response to this question, Zeke began to explain. No matter how large the water column, if you reduce the water pressure, it's just like a gentle flowing waterfall, Zeke explained. But as Zeke was explaining, he suddenly realized something, and his tone changed. He's here. Velwire, the killing machine, Zeke announced. At this moment, Velwire's body was filled with bloodlust and menace. Someone's about to meet their end. Just catching a glimpse of Velwire's figure made Alad tremble, though he tried to appear dangerous. Velwire was sure to turn someone into a sacrifice. But before he could finish speaking, Velwire immediately closed in on him, swinging a sword that caused Alad to hastily discard the book and flee. As the book left Alad's hands and hit the ground, the face on the cover began screaming like a tortured pig. Wild found it deafening, so he stabbed it in the throat. After that blow, the book fell silent. No one knew if it had died. This twisted creation of Vald is truly disgusting. Velwire began scornfully, glancing at the face on the book cover. Suddenly, the hovering statue in midair began to undergo some kind of transformation. First, the base at its feet began to drop, followed by a shockwave starting to occur. Alad burst out laughing at the sight, seeming to have lost his nerve. Haha, finally it's starting. Judgment Day has come, he said. Upon hearing this, Velwire immediately aimed his sword at him and mockingly stated, The book is destroyed. How can it be? Despite being threatened with a sword, Alad remained confident. Once life force is drained into the ground, the ritual will begin automatically. Once it starts, nothing can stop it. The ritual won't stop until the entire city is conquered. Now, an underground stream was transmitting Vald's energy onto the surface. However, just as he spoke these words, the shockwave suddenly stopped, much like how it appeared. Elle began to panic at the sight of this turn of events. Zich began to explain. Do you want to know why? The seals I placed on those statues are real. They've disrupted the ritual. See? Short-lived hope feels great, doesn't it? Zich said, smiling brightly. So, the outcome of the battle is that the ritual has been thwarted, and Alad has been captured. The next morning, the city's inhabitants returned to their daily lives, unaware that they had just overcome a great danger. At this time, Zich's group and Luvella's group were preparing to part ways. Before parting, Velwire began to thank Zich. Thank you very much, Zich. It's thanks to you that I quickly discovered Miss Luvella was in danger, all because of your note. I'm glad nothing bad happened before I arrived, Velwire said. Upon hearing this, Zich hurriedly replied, I was just timing when Hand would find you. It was mainly Hand who worked tirelessly like a dog to locate you. Well then, we're off, Zich said as he extended his hand to bid farewell to Luvella. Hearing this, Luvella still felt a bit regretful. Could you rest a bit more at the temple? I have to go. My next destination has been decided, she said. After that, both groups officially parted ways. Luvella's group returned to the temple. At this point, Luvella revealed to Velwire something she had heard from Hand. I heard from Hand that Ziki is the eldest son of the Steelwill family. This information even surprises someone as composed as you, Velwire. Does this mean he's a descendant of the great kingdom's Steelwill family? Well, even though I'm not sure if he was joking or serious, Velwire murmured, beginning to contemplate. I understand. In that case, we shouldn't mention Ziki in the report. If they find out he taught us the sealing magic that disrupted the ritual, Vald will pursue Zich. Yes, that's right, Luvella agreed. Afterward, Luvella bid farewell to Velwire to report everything back to the Pope. Immediately after Velwire left, a mysterious dark figure appeared behind Luvella, and a voice began to speak. Are you Lady Luvella? Upon hearing this voice, Luvella turned around and asked who he was. The person across from her smiled and introduced himself. Hello, I'm Green Zenard. Upon hearing this, Luvella vaguely guessed who he was. Are you the distinguished knight who came here to help by order? Green nodded and replied, It's an honor for an outsider like me to volunteer for Carwoodman. But I have a question. How do you know me? Have we met before? Others have told me about someone like you, Luvella explained. I was planning to introduce myself where there are more people, but you don't seem well. Are you worried about something? Green softened his voice and said, I apologize for being overly curious. If you're concerned about something, I can listen. Luvella quickly waved her hand and declined, It's okay. Thank you, but I'm not particularly worried about anything right now. I think I just look worried because I'm tired. Green understood that they had just met, so his eagerness to inquire seemed excessive. He gently replied, I don't mean to detain you when you're tired. Please rest, it was nice to meet you. Upon hearing this, Luvella immediately left. However, she didn't see the unsettling expression on Green's face, which had suddenly darkened. Green muttered to himself, sensing a change, something's different. Meanwhile, near the mining town of Seoul, Zich's group was moving and engaging in combat, primarily for Hand's training and to enhance his strength. At this moment, Hand had just defeated a giant monster, though it left him a bit exhausted. Upon seeing this, Zich praised him. Now you've taken down a few big bulls. Hand chuckled nervously in response. However, right then, a cry for help rang out, grabbing both their attention. Ahead of them, a young boy was being chased by a group of goblins. Zich swiftly intervened and dispatched the creatures with a single strike, taking out 4 goblins in one move. This sight caused the young boy to halt in his tracks, then turn and express his gratitude. Thank you for saving me. Hand, standing nearby, asked curiously, But why were you being chased by goblins? The young boy scratched his head and explained, Oh, that's because I'm in training as an adventurer. Both Zich and Hand were puzzled by this revelation. The training of an adventurer? They wondered aloud. The boy clarified further, I work as a miner currently, but my dream is to become a seasoned adventurer. I'm currently in training for it. Before he could elaborate, a loud voice interrupted from behind, "Hey, come here. Can't even handle a single goblin on your own." The voice belonged to a displeased man, whose face showed annoyance. Upon hearing his harsh words, the young boy hurriedly replied, "Yes, I'm coming right away. May I ask your name? I'm sure I'll repay you later. I'm Snock." Zeke nodded and replied casually, "All right, see you again, Snock." With that, Snock returned to the man, and Hand still remained puzzled. "An adventurer trainer? I've never heard of such a profession," he remarked. Zeke, however, shrugged off the topic, poking his ear as he said, "Doesn't matter. Enough chit-chat. How about you try fighting that monster over there?" At this moment, behind Hand, there was a gigantic bull preparing to attack him with a club. Returning to Snock's side, both of them were moving into a mining area. The man ahead started speaking in an irritated tone, "Use your mana to move, come on." Snock hurriedly replied, but right after that, his foot collided with a protruding rock and his entire body fell to the ground. This further annoyed the man ahead. "How many times do you intend to fall? I can't stand it anymore. Training ends here for today." Snock, holding his knees and startled by the words, said, "All right, I'll disappear from your sight then." Upon hearing this, Snock began to feel flustered. "Sir, please wait, I still want to practice more." Just then, as he was about to chase after the irritating man ahead, a small field mouse suddenly bumped into his feet. This made Snock wonder, where did this field mouse come from? Oh, it must have come from the collapsed mine. This place could be dangerous for it. Saying this, Snock sat down and spoke to the small creature in front of him. "It's dangerous here. You should go back to your family." After saying this, Snock turned around and started to walk away. However, with each step he took, the field mouse also took a step. This situation made Snock feel uneasy. He turned back and said, "Why are you following me like this? Don't tell me you have nowhere else to go." But after Snock finished speaking, the field mouse didn't react at all, further perplexing Snock. "What should I do now? Or is it supposed to be like this? Do you want to come with me?" Switching scenes to Zeke and Hand, both were having dinner inside a restaurant. Hand was the first to speak up. "Sir Zeke, I've been curious about something throughout our journey here. Why did you choose Seoul as our next destination after leaving Porty? Did you mention it as our next stop?" Hand spoke while eating, which surprised Zeke a bit. "You still remember, huh? I'm not so foolish as to forget what just happened." Hand continued, "Sir Zeke, I'm curious. What day are you referring to? I wouldn't understand even if you told me." Zeke began to explain. "Well, that's because on that day, the day of Seoul's destruction, it's been getting closer day by day." Returning to Snock, he was also wondering what to name the mole he had just found. "Let's see, I should give you a name first. Marriott? Nori? No, something more refined. Noam. From now on, your name will be Noam," Snock said, holding Noam high. At the same time, in the mine, the grumpy trainer was having a meeting with some mysterious guy. First, the mysterious guy threw a bag full of gold coins at the grumpy trainer. After checking it, the trainer smiled and said, "So our deal is done. I guarantee that idiot has found the mole. Now I will end my student-teacher relationship with him." The mysterious guy opposite him said, "Thank you for your help. Thanks to you, I think I can proceed with my plan." Returning to Zeke and Hand, the next morning, they were strolling around the town. Hand was being drawn in by the exaggerated claims of the many cunning merchants on the street. "Look here, this stone only appears once every 1,000 years. Indeed, these bombastic advertisements caught Hand's attention, but just as he was about to ask for more information, an old lady behind him started advertising. "Young man, you'll look amazing in this," she said, holding up a very colorful shirt. Even the butcher next door wasn't to be outdone. "Young man, try this. This is grilled meat marinated in a very special spice," he said, holding up a fragrant, freshly grilled pork leg. As a result, with just a few advertising words, Hand was herded like a chicken, even though he was still happily showing off to Zeke. "Mr. Zeke, what do you think? Don't I look great in this? This grilled meat is amazing." Seeing this scene, Zeke's face darkened. He didn't know what to say. People like Hand would run out of money if they brought too much to the market. But just as Zeke was thinking this, a voice that caught his attention rang in his ears. I always knew that Snock would be tricked eventually. Then a miner responded to this man's words. You mean the retired master adventurer, right? The old man, upon hearing this, grumbled, Don't make me talk about it. The shock was too great. Snock hasn't even left the house. After hearing this story, Zeke started to think, Snock, isn't that his name? Then Zeke remembered the trainer's words and attitude and realized, no wonder I don't like him. He's a fraud. While Zeke was just lost in thought for a moment, Hand had already bought a bunch of stuff. Mr. Zeke, you should try this. It's delicious, Hand said, his hands full of food. He kept saying, try this, but in reality, Zeke didn't know which one to try. Hand's appearance made Zeke speechless. Looking at Hand's interface, he looked more like a swindler than ever. Transition to the evening at some house. Snock was lying on his bed, staring blankly at the ceiling. It wasn't until he heard Noam's noises that he reacted a bit. What's wrong, Noam? He asked, reaching out to pet Noam, who thoroughly enjoyed it. This scene made Snock feel a bit better. You're lucky, Noam. You can be happy without worrying about anything, Snock said as he scratched Noam's belly, making the little mole very happy. But these unthinking words made Noam a bit angry. The little mole started jumping on Snock's face, scratching his hair. Snock quickly shouted, Are you getting back at me for saying you can't think? But suddenly, the sound of a door opening startled Snock. He sat up quickly. Who's there? He called out, but no one responded. Snock saw that the door was wide open, but there was no one outside. This puzzled him. How did the door open by itself? Thinking this, Snock reached out to close the door, but felt a strange sensation at the same time. What's this? I feel like someone was just here, or am I mistaken? Snock thought to himself, unaware that behind him stood a mysterious shadow. On the side of Zeke and Hand, both were having so much fun that they lost track of time and space. When they finally looked back, the sky had already darkened without them noticing. Suddenly, Zeke noticed a dark figure moving swiftly across the rooftops. There were 4 of them, seemingly kidnapping someone. Hand also saw the scene and started to worry. What is that, Zeke? Hand asked anxiously. Zeke replied calmly, Looks like trouble. Then Zeke suddenly realized something that surprised him. Isn't that the kid we saw earlier? Why are they holding him? Did they kidnap him after he was tricked by that adventurer wannabe? It looks suspicious. Should we chase after them? Zeke pondered, thinking it might be an opportunity to do something good. He decided quickly and handed his food to Hand. Take this and head back to the inn first. What about you? Hand worriedly asked, Shouldn't I come with you? I'll be fine. I'll catch up, Zeke assured him. With that, Zeke used his full speed to chase after the kidnappers. In Hand's astonishment, with just one leap, Zeke dashed straight onto the rooftop and continued pursuit. As he chased, he shouted, Hey, you guys! Care to talk about the cargo you're carrying? However, the kidnappers showed no intention of stopping or talking. One of them quickly pulled out a knife and hurled it towards Zeke. Naturally, Zeke easily dodged the clumsy attack and even caught the knife mid-air before throwing it back towards them, aiming for the one holding Snock. The kidnapper, struck by surprise after being hit by his own knife, lost balance and fell off the roof. The others hurriedly pursued, but Zeke managed to catch up to them. Who are you people? Zeke demanded, his voice firm. But the kidnappers remained silent. The leader, holding on to Snock, ordered, Kill him. Right after his command, the remaining 2 accomplices rushed in. Zeke, seeing their penchant for violence over dialogue, grew furious. You scoundrels! When I ask a question, could you please answer? Zeke exclaimed, dodging a knife from one of the kidnappers and promptly flooring him with a punch. The nimble kidnapper closed in from the side and attempted a strike, only to be easily evaded by Zeke, who swiftly countered with a knee to the face, breaking his nose. Seeing his 2 cronies easily subdued, the leader immediately decided to flee, aggravating Zeke further. Damn it! They'd complicated everything, Zeke muttered as he leaped onto the roof to give chase. Thus began the pursuit deep into the woods, where the scoundrel leader, carrying a hostage, ran like the wind. Both parties continued the chase until they emerged from the forest. The leader darted into a mining area and vanished. Just as Zich was about to pursue, 3 new accomplices suddenly appeared out of nowhere, halting his advance. "Who are you people? Are you related to the Noam, the destroyer god?" Zich demanded, frustrated by the unexpected interference. These 3 acted similarly to the previous ones, silent but deadly with their knives. However, Zich swiftly dispatched them with his skillful swordplay, leaving them sprawled on the ground. Though he could smell the dirt on their clothes, Zich couldn't shake the feeling that something peculiar was happening. Despite their assassin-like skills, their origin remained a mystery. Why did I come to this city? Was it because of the impending disaster? Zich mused aloud, pondering the strange coincidence of their appearance. As he processed this, Zich turned to one of the captured kidnappers ahead. "Are you involved with the Noam, the destroyer god?" While Zich was still investigating the kidnapping outside, Snotch inside had already begun to wake up, awakened by Noam. "Where am I?" Snotch groggily asked, but before he could fully orient himself, a hand grabbed Noam. The perpetrator was the leader of the kidnappers. Seeing his close friend seized, Snotch quickly shouted, "Let her go." The leader paid no attention to Snotch's pleas. With a squeeze of his hand, he lifted Noam off the ground. "Interesting. I thought you were a coward. Is it because of your special relationship with this little mouse?" he mocked, laughing. As Noam cried out in fear, it seemed the leader grew tired of holding her. He tossed her into a corner without a second thought. Snotch, still bewildered, began to yell, trying to make sense of what was happening. After a collision, he asked, "What are you saying?" After uttering these words, Snotch suddenly realized that this was the collapsed mine. His hands now touched the rocks, seemingly searching for something. But then, the leader's voice rang out, startling him. "Why are you looking for something over there?" he said. Snotch turned back, his face shocked. Before Snotch could say anything, the leader explained, "Your face clearly shows it." "How do you know about it?" "There's nothing special about it. It's just that in your eyes, there's sadness and despair, as if you were looking into your father's grave." "Do you know my father?" "Yes, I'm very familiar with him," the leader said, pointing ahead where the light spread. He continued, "This is the sealing stone, sealing the mine's monsters. According to both of us, there's a stone with strange patterns trapped inside other stones. While working at the mine, your father touched the sealing stone, awakening the mine's monsters. That's why the mine and the surrounding area collapsed, burying your father alive. Do you feel pain? Do you feel resentment?" The words of the leader made Snot's body begin to tremble. It was unclear whether this was due to agony or awakening. Snot's reaction seemed to satisfy the leader immensely. Now, he just needed to add a little more fuel to the fire. The leader leaned close to Snot's ear and whispered, "The creature that stole your father and made you hate mining is the beast of the mine." These words truly ignited anger and fury within Snot. His face now resembled that of a rabid dog, ready to bite anyone. The leader, feeling provoked, decided this was enough. He then brought Noam in front of Snot and said, "Now, pass judgment on the monster you despise." Snot was confused upon hearing this. "What are you saying? Why is Noam?" The leader began to explain, "This is the culprit that caused the earthquake and killed your father. It is the beast of the mine." Noam seemed to understand the leader's words as tears began to stream down his face. Snot's expression became one of extreme bewilderment and worry due to this sudden news. The leader continued to laugh and said, "It killed your father and then pretended to be your family. It must be secretly mocking you. Now quickly, pass judgment on this damn monster." Upon hearing this, Snot's face began to change, and a red light shone in his eyes. Meanwhile, Zich was still cursing the kidnappers from earlier. "That damn guy! Who would have thought that just as I asked about Noam, he would make himself explode? Even the way he self-destructed was dramatic. My clothes were nearly burned. The assassins also knew how to use fire magic and even carried artifacts. Most importantly, they were connected to Noam. Who is behind them?" Thinking of this, Zich had already reached the entrance of the mine. At the same time, a frightening power emanated from within. Zich immediately drew his sword and assumed a combat stance, ready for any situation. However, Zich was slightly shocked because the person stepping out from the mine was Snock. But now, Snock looked very different. His hair and eyes were blazing red, and his face was filled with fury.